Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today for this webinar looking at the art and culture sector in the Gulf in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Raymond Karam and I'm the Chief Program and Development Officer here at AGSIW. We have a global audience joining us today with over 460 registered attendees tuning in from all around the world. On behalf of all of us here, Ramadan Kareem to those of you who are celebrating. This session is part of a series of programs we are hosting in a virtual format, and we're delighted to bring you a fantastic lineup with some of the leaders of the most prominent art and culture institutions in the region. They're joining us from Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Kuwait. I'll let our moderator introduce them in more detail. The moderator for this session is our colleague and good friend Hanan Worrell. Hanan is a specialist in international urban and cultural projects with over 30 years of experience in both the public and private sectors. She has contributed to a number of impactful projects in the region, including NYU Abu Dhabi and the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi. She is currently the senior representative for the Solomon R. Guggenheim Foundation in Abu Dhabi with responsibilities for the planning and development of the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi Museum in Saadiyat Cultural District, as well as a non-resident fellow with us at AGSIW. Many of you know Hanan from her wonderful book, Table Tales, but I also want to plug a paper that she authored for us a couple of years ago now, but still quite relevant on the development of the art sector in the UAE. I will share that link in the chat with all of you. A quick disclaimer before we start, the webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website tomorrow. Also, a reminder to our audience, you are in listen-only mode, but you will be able to ask your questions through the Q&A function in Zoom. And you can also email us at info@agsiw.org or tag us on Twitter at Gulf States Inst. With that, Hanan, over to you.
Thank you, Raymond. Good morning and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ramadan Mubarak from Abu Dhabi, where we are an hour away from breaking our fast. So scheduling the webinar at this time of day is one way to ensure we adhere to the time limit. Today, we will hear from voices of the leading cultural institutions in the UAE and Kuwait on a topic that has completely changed our lives. The COVID-19 pandemic has presented an unparalleled challenge worldwide, and its impact on museums and cultural institutions has been staggering. It can be a bit depressing to think about what was supposed to happen in the past 2 months, the peak of the art season in the Gulf. We had Art Dubai, March meeting in Sharjah, Abu Dhabi's Culture Summit, Gallery Week at Sirkal, a string of new exhibitions at the Louvre Abu Dhabi, Art Jamil, Ishara, NYU Abu Dhabi, and Sharjah Art Foundation, to name a few, along with thousands of visitors, dozens of talks, film screenings, musical performances, artist residencies, and children's programs. Instead, these cultural institutions have had to shutter their doors, international flights have effectively been halted, and the countries have gone into lockdown. Much of our time since has been filled with talk of challenge and change and our new reality. So joining us in the conversation tonight are 4 exceptional leaders who have had to guide their nascent institutions through completely uncharted territory, probably not experienced in 100 years. So allow me to introduce them. Manuel Rabaté, the first director of the Louvre Abu Dhabi. He's worked on the museum since its inception more than a decade ago. He joined Agence France Musée a year after the signature of the intergovernmental agreement between France and Abu Dhabi, first as CFO, then Secretary General and CEO. The Louvre Abu Dhabi is a magnificent museum, as many of you know, designed by the renowned architect Jean Nouvel and situated on the shores of Saadiyat Island. It tells a story of humanity from its earliest days to the present. The Louvre Abu Dhabi opened in November 2017. It welcomed 1 million visitors in its inaugural year, and it's definitely been a game changer for the region. Next, I'd like to introduce Vilma Jurkute, the director of Sirkal. She has dedicated her career to developing and focusing on creative industries internationally. Vilma joined Sirkal in 2012 and has been really instrumental in its evolution into an integrated cultural destination, housing more than 60 contemporary art galleries, nonprofit organizations, homegrown businesses, community and creative spaces. Al Sirkal was founded by our dear friend and Emirati businessman and patron, Abdul Min'am bin Isa Al Sirkal in 2007. And in 2019, Al Sirkal Arts Foundation was established, dedicated to nonprofit activities in the arts. Next, I'd like to introduce Antonia. Antonia Carver, another dear friend, oversees Art Jamil across heritage, education, and the arts. As its director, she has led the development of Art Jamil through initiating exhibitions, education, and community projects, as well as opening new local institutions. The Jamil Arts Center is an innovative contemporary institution in Dubai. It opened in November 2018, and its sister institution, Hay Creative Hub in Jeddah, is scheduled for 2021, inshallah. Based in the UAE since 2001, Antonia was previously the director of Art Dubai. Last but not least, my new friend, Alia Al Ghanim. Alia is the deputy director of the Sheikh Jaber Al Ahmed Cultural Center in Kuwait City, affectionately known as JAC. JAC is a multidisciplinary public space striving to entertain, educate, and inspire the people of Kuwait. It opened in 2016 and offers a rich program of music, theater, film, and spoken word, rooted in Kuwait's modern, avant-garde, and experimental traditions. So welcome everybody. Welcome to our audience.
Thanks, Hanan.
I'd like to pose a question to all of you, to each of you, to start off by, can you share with us that moment when you realized that everything was going to change, that you were on the brink of something, and that your institutions would close their doors? And what has the impact been? Alia, would you like to start?
Sure. Hanan, thank you for having me, part of this great group. And we'd love today to just learn from each other's experiences and hear everyone in this uncertain time. As for Jack, we were actually in the middle of our dress rehearsal to premiere one of our largest shows, Kuwait Calling, which is an international collaboration between us and our creative partners, 59 Productions from the UK and the Rombear Dance Company. And in the middle of our dress rehearsal, the country of Kuwait announced a complete lockdown, the closure of the airport, home quarantines, all offices, all theaters were supposed to be closed. So in a matter of 24 hours, we had a crew and cast of like 70 people from international countries all over the world. And we had to figure out how to fly them out since they were scheduled to leave 7 days later. So that was quite a challenging time for us. And at the time, we just jumped into crisis management mode, I guess, and our teams, who I'm very proud of, just started trying to work with the situation itself, whether it be flying out the crews that were there or working on contractual issues with upcoming shows or reorganizing everything and rescheduling. And of course, as a domino effect, we had to cancel all our March and April shows, which were the 2 last months of our season.
Thank you, Alia. Vilma, how was your experience? You were one of the early ones, I believe, at the Sirkal.
I think there was this, just building up on Alia's points, I feel like we entered the period of continuous remaking. We knew in ways that that was the time that is going to challenge world order, or maybe one of us could argue a disorder. And we had to see how do we act versus react as an institution. And so with that, we made decision to close our doors, suspend all our programming, of course, send our residents from Al Sirkal Foundation back home, and I think identify ways in which we can protect our publics and our communities. And so I think since then, our perhaps integrity and values was our guiding compass as we tried to navigate this as a community. And again, as Al-Sirkal, I think we never associated ourselves with the built environment. So having this community spirit and support and the ability to recast our operations, our model to respond swiftly was I feel imperative. And perhaps you just realize in times like this that responsibility is not arbitrary. And you do start questioning what is our civic duty, even as cultural entities in times like this. And certainly at a later stage, which I think we will discuss, we responded or attempted to respond to different kinds of projects to support communities beyond Al-Sirkal territory.
Thank you, Vilma. Antonia, you had an interesting turn of events with an exhibition opening around the time.
Right, yes. I mean, on March the 10th, we were opening Michael Rakowitz's major exhibition. This is the largest exhibition that we've done to date at Jameel Arts Centre in Dubai. 2 floors, 12 major installations, and we were gearing up for that and working very closely with Michael, who was in Dubai with us from Chicago, and to install the exhibition. And as we got closer to the date, we realized what was happening. Obviously, we cancelled his Dar al Sukh dinner that he was going to do and many of the other events, but we decided to go ahead with the opening, but just make it a very small thing and invite sort of closest family and friends. And it was one of those occasions where everybody we invited showed up. We had around 250 people. Everyone was trying to sort of keep a little bit apart from each other. But, in those days, it sounds like a million years ago, it was only in March. But we, had a whole different kind of reality going on. And actually, it was a really beautiful occasion. I mean, for most people in the UAE, a lot in the art scene, a lot of people have said that was their last time of getting together. It had a kind of speakeasy kind of feel to us, and it was very emotional. I mean, Michael's work, for those of you that know his work, it's materially and emotionally and historically incredibly dense and meaningful and very sort of complex. And he himself is a very open and kind of emotional person. And that evening kind of got a very particular feeling to it, where, what you said about feeling like we were on the brink of something unknown was suddenly very kind of enhanced. You could really sort of feel it, in the air of the exhibition. And, very quickly after that, just a few days later, I mean, Manuel and I were talking a lot over that weekend, also touching base with Vilma and many other colleagues, and we kind of came to a collective decision that, we were going to have to close. Obviously one made with government, but sort of back and forth. And I guess already in the air at that time was a kind of new feeling of kind of collegiate coming together. We always talk a lot in the UAE where, it's a very close-knit art scene. But at that point, it seemed to sort of shift gear somehow into a new kind of form of collaboration, which I think has been, looking for tiny little silver linings to this situation, something that's come out of it. And we postponed all our public programming. We've shifted our funds into other programs, which we can maybe talk about in a little bit. I think we're getting onto that then. Right. As Vilma said, it's a whole very, very different international situation with working with colleagues locally, but also those conversations internationally are incredibly important. I'm sure that's something very present for Manuel in particular, being an international institution. But for us, we've suddenly found ourselves striking up conversations with all our touring venues. Everybody's calendar has had to change. It's suddenly, the art world really becomes, the art world at this point.
So Manuel, what was your experience leading such a significant institution with collection and exhibitions and partners?
Thanks. First of all, thanks Hanan and Raymond for having us on this topic, which is indeed absolutely relevant. I think Antonia said something about it was only in March, and we have to remember that indeed the situation has been changing and evolving a lot, and the question is interesting because it forces us to walk back the memory lane. In our case, at Louvre Abu Dhabi, being such a new museum, I mean, we opened less than 3 years ago. We had just opened an incredible show called Forosia, exploring the relationship of chivalry in the Arab world and in the West, and in a positive exchange. We just opened our new high-end restaurant, Phuket, in the Louvre Abu Dhabi. So we're completely in full speed, and we felt that the situation was changing globally and little by little locally. We first have put a crisis team in place, which, and I remember early March, the crisis team started to meet on a daily basis, and we were taking action in order to keep the museum open. And it was really a fight of trying. Our civic mission is also to make the Louvre Abu Dhabi a safe place, and most of the learning will be reused for the reopening. But so we put thermal camera, we put hand sanitizer everywhere. We suspended the tactile screens, and we really sort of the full visitor experience to make it safe. And I think that indeed by discussion and understanding, and mid-March we came to the actual decision that we couldn't keep the pace, and that we needed to regroup, to learn more, and to shut the museum. So we closed on the 15th in the evening, and we moved all the staff on remote working, and we kept only a strong little team by rotation working in the museum to make sure that we would keep all the time the maintenance, the hygrometry, temperature control of the climate, and to make security and the collection management and the curators who are every day checking the artwork. So we moved to this sort of digital world, and at the same time focusing a lot on the defense of the assets.
Manuel, it's interesting. I think I read something that you recently wrote that talked about the Louvre Abu Dhabi as a universal museum, which we're familiar with, centered on sort of the human connectivity and what we see in your collection and your programs and your collaboration. And I'm just wondering if that concept of, human connectivity, whether that was tested, now we're like maybe 6 or 8 weeks into the crisis, whether you felt that was tested or manifested during this crisis?
Tested and answered. I would say this, in a way, this virus is attacking really what Louvre Abu Dhabi believes in, which is the value of interconnection and exchanges. So yes, we have been challenged in what we were standing for. But I think even this talk is a demonstration the agility, the resilience, the capacity, the solidarity that we felt amongst all the museums and all the cultural organization is very, very important. Our team, for instance, and I thank them for that, moved all to the digital work. We are in constant connection. All the components. We have a very international team. Half of the team is Emirati, and the rest is coming from all over the world. So we kept this multicultural environment in the connection, and so I think we have been challenged on the connectivity itself, the physical connectivity, and we're all craving to get it back. And we know it will be different, and we will have to be cautious. But I would say in the essence of the interconnectivity between the civilization, between the languages, between the artwork and the people, it has in a way forced us to move to even further. We put the collection online. The Foroussia exhibition, now you can visit it digitally. We put the catalogs. They were already on sale, but we put them for free. We have activities online. So we move to a next phase, which is the museum beyond its walls, and in a way, the reach may be even larger in a way.
Actually, Vilma, you talk about that. You talk that As-Serkal is beyond the built environment, and we've seen a lot of the digital responses to COVID. As you said, we're living one of them, and many museums and galleries and cultural institutions have opted for those digital tours and the online content. But others have wanted to preserve more that physical or personal experience with the art or with the community. So what is As-Sirkal, what is in your experience and your take on how you've handled and adapted in this 8-week plus period?
I mean, I think collectively with our colleagues here, all of us transferred our material exhibitions online for a virtual experience. And I think we began in Al-Sirkal as a collective. So we constantly held those conversations with our community, our galleries, our artists, all members of Al-Sirkal, trying to understand and actually come up with ways as to how we can respond. So within 10 days, we were able to take all exhibitions that were meant to open on March 23rd online, and we organized a vernissage, and Al-Sirkal.online is still on view, and artworks are still available to be viewed and purchased. For those, best time to start your collection would be now. But I think what that did is, I think we all have certain boundaries in terms of the kind of practices that we represent and the kind of businesses and institutions that we have in Al-Sirkal. And I think we didn't look at how these boundaries separate, but we look as to where do they connect us. And I think we moved way beyond digital, because currently I feel there's more content online than there is audience. And I think we're all kind of, there's a bit of a fatigue to what is online at the moment. And so I think as a foundation, we're actually putting together a number of volumes to see how we can respond with more considered conversations and collective effort, and respond in a long form and produce a living archive. That's something I can talk about a bit later, perhaps. But certainly that was our experience at the beginning, which now is continuing to evolve, because I think we have to be mindful that the situation is still unfolding itself, especially in different parts of the world. So we still are not aware what's to come. And so we continuously need to be mindful, I think, in that process, as we think of what will be that new discursive space that we reopen in.
And you've already slightly reopened, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Antonia, your Art Jameel has long supported artists and researchers even before opening the center in Dubai. And given that and the precarious nature of how many of the artists and creatives live and the COVID impact, what has Art Jameel's response been? Can you share with us a little bit about the micro grants and some of the other initiatives?
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of agree with what Vilma was saying. I mean, I think virtual tours kind of work for commercial contexts like Al-Sirkal's context, but for not-for-profits and for museums, it's a really difficult balance to weigh up. I mean, do we want to sort of normalize this situation and begin to sort of push the digital so much that we lose the kind of sense of what it is to be physically with art in a room as it is, as in the context it was intended for? So we were very kind of cautious about doing kind of virtual tours. We also had to choose very carefully about our resources. All institutions right now are, facing a time where funds are going to, for sure, be reduced. We're already missing the income from our shop and our enterprises and things like that keep the museum going. So these are all kind of elements that you need to take into account. We made very, similar to what Manuel was saying, the team went into this kind of 24/7 brainstorming kind of mode. We'd always kind of thought to each other, let's be a kind of flexible, small-scale institution. Let's always be on our toes and always in that process of kind of research and development. And this was a time when it had to really, really kind of kick in. And like Manuel said, I'm super proud of the team. Everybody's working remotely and still brainstorming like crazy and taking things forward, which is incredible. We thought we were about to launch a painting commission. We do annual commissions. Sculpture and research have been the ones to date. We were about to launch a painting one, and then thought, maybe nobody will be able to get the canvas or get to their studios, and will we be able to even show the work? So we kind of about turned on that and instead launched a digital commission, and artists are very welcome to apply for that. The deadline is still very much open. And then, as you said, I mean, we've never been a grant-giving organisation direct to artists, but we decided this was a time to really rip up the rule book. And I'm a little bit similar to what Vilma was saying. You know, artists from all over the Middle East were coming to us saying, you know, this is a time of acute crisis for us. We're people who live paycheck to paycheck. You know, March and April is usually our complete boom time. And suddenly, you know, that period when we can really earn for the rest of the year has completely kind of vanished. So we launched what we call a research and practice platform, which is for giving micro grants of $1,000 to $3,000 to artists that live all over the MENA region, so Middle East and North Africa. And within 2 weeks, we've had almost 250 applications from 17 countries. Incredible projects are going on. I mean, in some ways, it's very life affirming, you know, to understand that artists out there, especially in countries where we maybe are underrepresented on the international scene, you know, places like Algeria, Morocco, Yemen, Libya, you know, there are a whole wealth of artists, writers and curators out there making incredible projects. And just yesterday, Dubai Culture announced that they've come in to underwrite the UAE portion of those grants as well. So this is something that's beginning to kind of snowball. And, you know, we see it as a totally collaborative kind of venture. We've set up the kind of platform, we have the jury, we have these cycles, the deadlines that are coming up. And, you know, hopefully more people will join in with that. And it's incredible, you know, obviously to have that sharp reminder being from the Gulf that, you know, a sum of $1,000 can make a massive difference to an artist that can support their family, their practice, their work for a couple of months in other countries around our region. So yeah, it's been a very, very intense time. I was talking to a colleague yesterday who said, you know, I've never been so physically apart from my colleagues, but I've also never been so mentally kind of connected. So I think, you know, these screens, we're kind of making it work, but hopefully not for too much longer.
Thank you, Antonia. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, the micro grants are really, really something that just hearing the numbers of people that have responded and the need out there and how a small number can go a long way for people. Alia, at your Performing Arts Center, I mean, you have quite a different set of challenges than what we've just heard about. And creation, theater and music, you actually have to come together to create. So what are some of the ways that Jack continues to think about educating and connecting with your public? And you've done some creative things recently.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we're a performing arts center, and a very big chunk of our work is related to social interactions. People have to be in a room together in order to rehearse. They have to be together on stage in order to create the production, and our audiences as well that feed off the energy of the live performances that are happening. So there's a lot of social interactions that unfortunately is very difficult at this time. However, at Jack, one example would be as our in-house orchestra worked on a piece of music that's we were trying to create awareness on the situation through music, and every orchestra member was playing his instruments from their home, at their home, encouraging people to stay home and kind of aware them through art and music. We're also internally as an organization, we're working a lot, planning, strategizing, working on the upcoming season. Hopefully this situation is a temporary situation, and we're constantly doing things. We're creating content that's going to be online for our audiences in the pipeline also. And it's just a challenge not being able to be in one organization, but we're trying to make the best of the tools that are available for us.
Yeah, inshallah the fall will be a better time.
Yeah.
Vilma, I'm I'd love to hear a bit more about Asakal Avenue. You use the term polyphonic, and you have institutions, creative spaces, businesses, food concepts. how did all of this come together during the crisis? I mean, there is the art gallery side, of course, and I'm sure that was very challenging, and maybe some could have folded. What were some of the things that you did and that the foundation did to help to navigate this period?
It's not my dog, just as a disclaimer. No worries. I think, well, in ways that cross collaboration and that diversity of disciplines that we represent is, I think, what leads to a completely new way of reimagining as to how we can consolidate going forward. I mean, I think in general, we'll be probably seeing more of commune models emerge in the future. And I think there is always more willingness to consolidate your resources in order to help others. And we launched an initiative called El Cercal Pay It Forward, which initially was a fund for around 5 million dirhams to subsidize a quarter of rent, of lease, subsidies for our community members. So we represent more than 85 institutions and businesses. And the idea was, how can we actually help each of these? Is it a gallery space or a creative community space? We view it as a porous ecosystem. I think it's kind of reductive to think of it as a space or just a gallery. It's, you know, there's artist roster, there are people involved in making those institutions alive. And I think a lot of our galleries were instrumental and perhaps the founders of the art scene alongside the colleagues here in the past decade. And so that, but, you know, I think it was, I remember sitting with Abdel Monam and talking about this, and he's like, this is nothing, you know, this is not, how far is this gonna get us through or support the creative sector? So I think these further relief measures will still be initiated, and perhaps there will be more support that's required for the creative sector here and globally. I think, again, we cannot forget that this is a global crisis and a global situation, and recognizing these conditions within is so essential. But certainly, I think what was the most exciting aspect from this is to looking at the silver lining. It was conditional to all of us giving back. And so you had, you know, someone like Inked, which is a culinary experience, usually for luxury clients, became a community kitchen that now donates 300 meals a day. And galleries and their artists donated work. And all the proceeds of that work went to purchase more meals for frontline staff, for vulnerable communities around us. Now we have other members of the community opting together to produce masks. And so it's becoming a ripple effect. And I think that civic duty, first and foremost from cultural entities, is something important to recognize and perhaps think of, you know, how will we respond going forward? I think some of our vacant spaces will open up for artists and creatives made refuge to come and use it free of charge and create work and create that space where in general we can pose these urgent questions as to what the future paradigms will look like. I mean, I don't think we're able to abolish the current system totally, but hopefully there is, we come out in some sort of renewed form, perhaps. And I think we're still grasping of what this new totality looks like in our situation. And I want to shy away from speculative abstraction and trying to predict, but at least as a Cercal and as a community of creatives and thought leaders, I think in their own right in various disciplines, this was our attempt. And I think it will continue to grow so that we can find new models to sustain our industries.
We've got a few questions from the audience. Would you like to hear some?
Yeah, go on.
All right, so there's a couple, one from Nov and from Giacomo. Thank you for joining us. The question is, what are your digital takeaways from this experience? Do you believe your institutions will continue on delivering this amount of digital content even after the pandemic? Monsieur Manuel, would you like to take that one first?
I would love to. Indeed, because I almost jumped because I agree with Vilma when she talked about the digital fatigue and the risk. And Antonia shared also the questioning, the pertinence of what to do online, what makes sense. And I think that one of the key learning from this crisis, at least in our case, is that it accelerated the digital transformation. And the museum is a place in which we curate exhibition, we curate artworks, we curate performances, we curate experiences for the visitors. So what does it mean to do it in the digital? And indeed, it's not just overfeeding with content without an angle on a discourse. And for us, I think the acceleration was to say what makes sense. How can we go? So, for instance, for Furussia, we put the visit, but also a very long recording of the curators explaining the exhibition that you can listen as a podcast. We gave the access to the catalog because this is where also the content here. And we are about to launch a few crazy projects that are also a new way to question. Like we have an immersive podcast, a science fiction novel under the dome of Louvre Abu Dhabi with our friend Stefan Krasniewski. It's a story, the voice of Jean Nouvel at the beginning, Hussein Al-Jasmin in Arabic, William Dafoe in English, Charlotte Gainsbourg in French. They tell a story. It's completely hypnotic and magic. This is one way to visit Louvre Abu Dhabi in an immersive way. Beautiful, the three languages of Louvre Abu Dhabi are there. And I'm very proud of this. We are, instead of visiting the galleries today, we will launch also poetic narration. So we are a museum we tell the story of the world. Huh? So we tell 10,000 years of history with cross-civilization exchange. So one way is to play also on this storytelling and to develop content which makes sense using the storytelling and giving a way to discover the history, art history of the world like that. So we're also in capacity to explore, to push the envelope a little bit further. We are also connected to a platform which was launched by my chairman, Mohamed Al-Mubarak, 2-3 weeks ago, called Culture Hall, in which we aggregate content and you have exchange from Louvre Abu Dhabi, but also from other institutions. With this acceleration of exchanges and indeed the question, when there is so much, the question is what makes sense. And this is what a museum, what a gallery and what a performing arts center is about. What makes sense? This is called programming, curating, and this is what we have to do. So the takeaway for us will be to push yourself a little bit further in the digital world beyond the walls of the museum.
Yeah. There's a lot of questions, folks, but Antonia, go ahead and then we'll take some of the other questions.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in very quickly. I mean, I'm very similar to Manuel as well about, we'd always sort of thought, we must get round to doing all these things online, and this really sort of suddenly forced us to accelerate that program. But also a very good reminder, I mean, Art Jameel is a regional organization. Yes, our bases are in Jeddah and in Dubai, but, this was a sharp reminder that for a lot of countries, perhaps the majority of the population of the Middle East, it's, travel is a total luxury, not only visas, but also the situation, economic situation, neo and post-war situations. So it's a good reminder of how do you reach out to those kinds of audiences and engage them just as much as the ones that you can physically kind of connect with. And I totally agree. I think education works really well online. And at the moment with homeschooling going on, this is almost an opportunity for those of us that work in education. So our Jameel houses in Cairo and in Jeddah have been putting workshops online. We have around 10 artists in the UAE who've also done artist-led workshops, and those have been flying. And I mean, I know there is a kind of digital fatigue, but at the same time, I mean, our website is up 35% in terms of engagement over the last 2 weeks. And we've also seen that audiences have a real capacity to look at things slowly and in depth. So I think one of the things that will come out of this is obviously a great questioning of event culture, and event culture has totally taken over the whole of the art world over the last 20 years, 25 years maybe. So now it's a time to sort of reconsider that. But, you know, one event we did was a kind of meditative session. It lasted an hour. We did one in English, one in Arabic, looking at one work very slowly over an hour. And the take up for that online was incredible. I mean, we were fully booked within half an hour of launching the event. So people have a capacity to really, really kind of engage. I think it's just what Manuel was saying about trying to just really address digital art into digital means and address things that can be in an online context, but not try and create physical experiences online necessarily.
Thank you. Let's take another question. So this is from Hind, our friend Hind Mizena. And her question is, thank you, Hind, for being here. Would you, she would like to hear more about what plans or what thinking is happening by venues like Louvre Abu Dhabi and JAC about how to welcome visitors. Are you thinking about how physically you'll need to make changes and how to make sure there's enough distance, and how will people relate in this new public space? Alia, do you want to take a stab at it, and then
Sure. Of course, this is a very challenging thing for us. We've been definitely talking about it and planning. Depending on the situation and where it goes, we definitely have plans on how the way we will welcome audiences. It could be a capacity issue. Like an interesting thing I just read and received was from the National Theatre in Taiwan, in Taipei. And these theaters have a capacity of 1,500, 2,000 people. Their new COVID regulations are only allowing 100 people per event for any indoor event. And this is slashing your capacity by a huge number. And 500 for outdoor events. So, and people have to keep a 1.5 meter distance from each other. So these are things that we're going to have to think about, and we are definitely thinking about them. Also for us to expand digitally and to allow audiences to maybe see those performances that are coming up through digital channels and platforms, to keep allowing the artists to connect with their audiences. For hopefully things will clear up and we'll be able to come up with the correct plan that ensures everyone's safety and goes within the regulations of every country in this crisis.
Manuel, what you've been thinking about this a lot.
We're working a lot on this topic, like a real. But first, maybe just to be clear, in Louvre Abu Dhabi, we believe absolutely in the physical importance of the materiality of the artwork. It's also one of the mottos. So my enthusiasm for the digital and the new challenges is also in the absence of the object, but the core, the DNA of what we do is about meeting the object and being able to feel their aura and the co-visibility also of different objects. So this cannot be compensated by digital. The thing is, we can open only if we are a completely safe place. So we have a group which is working days and night on running scenarios. As Alia just said, indeed there will be the first obvious effect will be on the capacity itself, on the distancing. We already have the thermal camera was there, just waiting to be reactivated we'll use them for the staff going to the museum, but we will use them for the visitors. The question is the distancing, the mask. We are talking, and this is also one of the takeaway of this crisis is solidarity and in our case, Louvre Abu Dhabi, in the text creating the Louvre Abu Dhabi, there is a notion of between East and West, and we're talking to our colleagues in China or in Hong Kong on exchanging some of their rules, as you do, Alia, and we're also talking to the West to exchange and to try to build up the best practices. The groups, the subject of the group will be a topic. How can we handle group? Can we minimize them? Do we? What are the rules? What is? And then again, the technology can help. The multimedia guide that we have, the app today, it's an app free to download, the Louvre Abu Dhabi, which the download has exploded. I'm sure it's going to be also part of the visit, of the experience, explaining the app as an usher, the app as an explanation that helps you, guides you on how we can use it in the definitely in the booking system, having slots. If you have a rarity, the new rarity will be access to the museum. So how do we organize and how do we distribute fairness this? It will mean playing with slot, with moment, with and so on. And again, the digital will help us on less content, but more ticketing. And it will be very useful to fluidify and to make sure that everybody who has the desire to go back to the museum can find it here.
We have another. Wait, Vilma, I've got another one for you. There's like a lot of questions, so I want to make sure we give our audience a little bit. So this is from Rima, and I think Vilma, we'll start with Vilma on this one. As a counseling psychologist, I'm interested in ways your organizations are thinking about the emotional well-being of the creative community, both during and after the pandemic. I'm also wondering about how has the pandemic made you redefine how you are understanding what the word community means to you. I would love to hear all of you.
I think some of those collective aspects is something we touched upon in terms of that we represented polyphonic self-esteem and polyphonic sense of identities. And, I think it was an incredible contribution from our own team, my colleagues, our community, Al-Circle family, and other members of the UAE coming together and reimagining ways that we respond during this time. I think there is no doubt the way we connect with our audiences, even in the scenario tonight, we are talking to more than 400 people here. We would have never been able to do that in the physical realm. And I think in terms of our well-being, I mean, we as Al-Circle partly opened. I think we said we are kind of open, and I think we are transparent about the uncertainty that we are dealing with. But I think there is an opportunity there as well. Going back to this aspect of slowing down, like Antonia mentioned, the art world was accelerating its history. Things were being archived before they were finished, and whether slowing down will create for more interactive and meaningful experiences. I mean, it connects greatly to my research at Oxford, which was on the sense of belonging in young people and the role that cultural institutions have to play. And I think we're already witnessing that. I received so many WhatsApps and messages daily since we reopened, saying, can I please go, even if it's by appointment only, and see the works and speak to the artists and speak to the gallerists. I think while it was a very difficult time, in ways it was a time that gave us an opportunity to think, and in ways to reconnect with our own practice, which many of us didn't even have a chance to do anymore. We were living in such a fast-paced world. And so in ways, I think that's how we see it, that there is an opportunity for us to create new spaces of being and thinking and working, and more inclusive spaces where we can all reconnect and rethink what the next paradigm would look like.
Antonia, do you want to comment on community and well-being? I've got other questions, but if you'd like.
Yeah, no, go. Let's have some more questions.
Okay, Alia, I think this one's for you. Will the pandemic affect the budget of future productions and shows? Will the standard be lessened? I think it could apply to everyone, but it sounds like it.
Yeah, I feel like it's a global health crisis that's affected everyone in their own different way. And obviously, everyone will be affected some way or the other. Hopefully at JAC, we strive to keep our standards high and focus on performances that are of caliber. So like, let's say, as an example, we're planning the next season that will hopefully start in October. And we'd like to focus on our star product, which is our in-house orchestra, and go local this time. And our orchestra has always been a popular product with everyone locally for our audiences and regionally. I mean, they've toured Saudi, Qatar, Vienna. We have requests to tour them in Hong Kong, England, Egypt. So they're really a great standard and quality and a great product that we really want to focus on next season. So hopefully we will try and give our audiences the best experience that we can, taking into consideration all the limitations that are around us.
Mm. Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think that sounds brilliant, and that this kind of idea of this as being a time to support local is something that's really resonated with us too. We launched a kind of online festival over the last couple of weeks, including local music, all based in the UAE, and all the talent was UAE based and homegrown. So musicians, filmmakers, artists, and also done directories of local eateries and also directories of local artisans from whom you can buy products. And this idea of really kind of thinking, rather than succumbing to any kind of cultural cringe of thinking that things from the outside must somehow be more worthy, to really focus in instead on sort of the local talent and have that shine, and try and get across the message that supporting artists in this way can be something very small scale. You can buy something original from a young artisan who's based locally, rather than going to a department store, for example. And that is a way of kind of giving back to the cultural community. And we're looking at doing something similar in Saudi as well. I mean, just to sort of, I know we're trying to be a little bit broader in our approach to the Gulf. We only have the UAE and Kuwait today, but just to sort of put a shout out to Saudi. I mean, I think Saudi's in a very particular situation right now with the double whammy of the oil price as well as COVID-19. And also, of course, Saudi was at a particular kind of period of renaissance with the arts, where things were really building up at a very rapid and very exciting rate. A lot of people who had been having, day jobs, but they secretly wanted to be artists, have made that leap into working primarily in the art field. And then, of course, this global crisis has hit us all. So no doubt Saudi will bounce back, and that kind of great sort of bank of incredible DIY and homegrown talent will kind of kick in. But it's a very particular moment in this, in story of the recent surge in Saudi.
Thank you. Manuel, there's a question for you from Marie. She says, "Hi, Marie. France has been on one of the most European countries touched by COVID-19. Will it change something for the future of the Louvre Abu Dhabi?"
The situation has changed drastically everywhere in the world in terms of art transportation, and we have a big challenge. And we're discussing that with the French part. Louvre Abu Dhabi has a very strong connection with all the French museums, the Louvre, first one, but all the full system, and this is where we have fantastic loans and great exhibitions. So indeed, we have logistic issues that we are trying to fix. The connection has not stopped at all. On the contrary, we are exchanging, chatting, discussing, adapting, and sharing. So the question is more a global question beyond the Louvre Abu Dhabi or even the Gulf institution. It's what will be the new model of art transportation on international exhibition. How will they structure? Who will have the capacity to organize on how? In our case, it's really one of the backbone of Louvre Abu Dhabi. So we are preparing very robustly for that. Just before, I would like to say something about the community, because I think we have a role to play, and maybe with new exhibition, maybe with new loans, or indeed working with the artistic community, but we have a role to play in the resilience of the country, of the region, and of the world. More than ever, and I truly believe that, more than ever, the cultural institutions, the museums, the galleries, the performing arts have a role to play because of the elevation that art is giving, because of the relief, of the transformation, of the aspirational impact it can have on a society. And they are modelization of the positive impact. And it's not only economical, very important, the economical impact on tourism, but it's also the civic role, the educational role, the well-being, and I think we are a voice that should not be shut. And I'm very glad that in our case we have the total support of Abu Dhabi authorities to be able to really strongly take our part of this resilient and this post. It will be a post-peak of the crisis. We know that the situation is going to be strange for a while for the art transportation, but also for the visitation and so on. But we have to play our part in it, and I think we will.
So
I just wanted to very quickly second that, and also just say that no, I'm totally with you on that, Manuel. And we can already see this in this enormous surge of interest in the arts. If you take the arts in the broadest sense, including TV and film and books and everything. And I think we have a certain kind of parallel with what's happening in the media, where newspapers are being read and consumed more than ever, but of course advertising is on a decline. So these are kind of our parallel industries. We need to figure out new models of funding and new models of kind of survival at a time when we don't necessarily want to charge the public. This is a time to sort of be giving the arts out for free, but then how do you then sustain your model at a time when you're more popular than ever, but perhaps suffering more in terms of funding than ever as well?
A couple of related questions to that. Ibrahim asks, will the blockbuster exhibition still exist after COVID-19, and what will, the insurance claims, etc. But more this concept of blockbuster exhibit. And then Susie asks, what do you think the nature of the vernissage events in the public realm? Will it ever be back to normal pre-COVID? And what does that mean for the, the local and the international kind of experience if you don't have those? I don't know, Vilma, if you've got some thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said earlier, some of these questions are difficult to answer. I think we all have the same questions. And I try to refrain from preliminary commentary or creating these conclusions. But I think in terms of Al-Sirkal in general, it begins with how you measure success. And as an institution, I think if you look at, if it's led by economic determinism or footfall numbers, I find it quite reductive. I think for us, it was really looking at social impact and the kind of experience that we can create for our communities in the sense of belonging. Because as a district, we predominantly cater to the residents of the city. And I think the way we return, we will have to heal together. And our programming and collective response will have to recognize the conditions that we are in. I think it's our duty and responsibility, rightly, like you, Manuel, mentioned, we all have a role to play, and we must recognize the situation that we are currently in. And certainly, I can only hope it will lead to new changes. And like I mentioned, us entering a renewed form of the art world. But I do think that in Al-Sirkal's context, where we have, as a foundation, we never even got to install Malahi show. Just because of the safety of our team and the public. But it's fine because we are living in a different situation. And I don't think it's so much about our programming as the kind of new programs that we will ideate that will enable for these new discussions and new forms of knowledge to be produced that then could lead to a more significant impact.
Maybe just to jump in to answer the question. A lot of museum colleagues are talking about this. Will the blockbuster survive or not? I think definitely there'll be a reduction in the number of blockbusters and how those exhibitions are expected to travel. A lot of museums are talking about relying much more on their permanent collections at this time, and also allowing exhibitions to last for much longer. So therefore you see a sort of rise in public programming in order to sort of keep up visitor interest and make sure that people are continuing to attend multiple times to those exhibitions. But I'm actually really positive about the gathering. If you saw the, I think Art Dubai was the first kind of major event in the art fair world, and also in the region, to announce that it wasn't going to happen. And as we've seen with this kind of crisis, every time you think something is kind of almost an outlandish decision or very drastic, it turns out to be absolutely inevitable, in a kind of rolling domino effect as you've gone along. But I mean, seeing people be so kind of, emotionally wrought that Art Dubai wasn't happening makes you realize how much people are emotionally invested in these kinds of events. And I think what we've learned out of this is the kind of value of human capital and the human experience. So I think people will strive for that, and they'll want to get back to that, whatever, even if we have to sort of develop new ways of greeting each other and sort of be slightly distant from each other and all the rest of it.
So there's a couple questions along those lines as well, that, with travel, being restricted, tourism being a big driver in the region, and for a museum like the Louvre Abu Dhabi, what will you be doing, or will you be shifting focus to local audience? That was a question. So it's more like we talked a little bit about the art and the programs, but in terms of the audience.
Excellent, because it's a link between the two questions actually. And I wanted to say, I think the blockbuster per se model, business model, organizational model, yes, maybe challenged, but the strong exhibitions and wonderful exhibitions and the importance in the history of knowledge and art and culture will remain. And then it will be very important for institutions like ours, which is relatively unique in its model. Today we are tackling two types of audience. One is, of course, the tourism audience coming from all over the world. So this, of course, is directly impacted by the cycle, and we can just be prepared to welcome them back. But the second very strong side of our audience is the local communities, Emirati, resident, education, and these are also the big numbers already before the closure. And today, yes, it's for them a new opportunity to go even further in the appropriation for the Emirati national. When they see half of the artworks which are exhibited in the galleries of Louvre Abu Dhabi are the collection of Abu Dhabi, the national collection. So this is your asset, and these are masterpieces of humanity coming from all over the world, from the Arab world, but from the rest of the world. So in terms of also resilience, building the strengths of a nation despite adversity, I think that art is an elevation, a moment of pride, of thinking of the complexity of the world, and understanding of the complex world we live in. So you can do that by exhibition, you can do that by the incredible acquisitions that we have in the museum, and I think that the community are already interacting with Louvre Abu Dhabi, but they should normally come even more, and they will have also maybe more time and more specific. If we have to play with very strong regulation to make sure it's safe, what we can give in compensation will be specific moment and maybe intimate moment. And so we are thinking of how can we give more to the communities? How can we make sure that they have their intimate moment with the artwork? Does it mean we open every day? We create special moments? These are the questions that our team is assessing right now. As Vilma was saying, to give back to the community. It means this is their museum. This is the museum of the people here.
Yeah. I mean, Alia, probably you were mentioning earlier, and when we were chatting yesterday, that Jack, your audience is predominantly residents and Kuwaitis, and less. So you're probably less impacted by that. There's a question for you as well, if you want to. But there's another question for you from Bill. Hi, Bill. He says, well, actually, it's for all of you, but maybe Alia, let's start with you. How are you approaching financial commitments to artists and contractors whose events were canceled this spring, summer? And how are you approaching planning for the fall and beyond? Are you planning to extend virtual programming and in-person events?
As I mentioned, when we first got the news of the home quarantine and the changing situation, our teams, and I'm very proud of them, went into rescheduling, arranging everything, organizing everything. for whatever was canceled and for the upcoming season. So for whatever was canceled, we're definitely trying to and working on taking care of all the financial commitments that we have. And in terms of programming for the next season, as I said, we still postponed the shows that were supposed to be in March and in April to the next season. And we're working out schedules with our partners from whether it's locally or all over the world. And working on the digital platforms, as I mentioned, it's something that we're also planning and working on, just in case the season starts and we're unable to have people or the capacities have to be cut down. We're looking at maybe streaming our shows to the audiences. It's not going to have the same effect as attending a live performance, but these are one of the options that we're looking for.
Great, Alia. There's actually a couple interesting questions related from Diana. Hi, Diana from Michigan. She says, has the current crisis and the shift to digital led to more or less partnerships and collaborations among cultural institutions in the Gulf? And then the other question from Lisa at Tashkil, do you think there's a need for a more formalized network of cultural institutions to be formed in the region in order to collectively address operational as well as programming issues moving forward within the era of a new normality? So this strain that you're all feeling in terms of resources and capacity and ability to engage, and at the same time there's a possibility of pooling that. So what are your thoughts?
If I may just jump in, I'm on advisory board for Global Cultural Districts Network, and I think having these discussions in the past 2 months was very helpful, just to hear your colleagues globally. But I feel like in the UAE or the GCC, we are informally connected already as leaders of these institutions and members of various organizations, but perhaps as it continues to grow and develop, Lisa, why don't you go ahead and form that association? As Tashkil could begin and lead that, and we would be happy, I think, to all kind of join hands. But I do feel that from the informal aspect, there's quite a bit of collaboration, like Antonia mentioned. I mean, we were all on Zoom calls immediately during the COVID-19 situation as it was escalating. As we look at our future and the program for fall and virtual programming, we'll certainly keep our virtual connections to our audiences. I think, if anything, with Al-Sarkal.online, when it just was released at night during Vernissage, we had 10,000 visitors, and just in a matter of hours. And I think that kind of connectivity is important to retain with audiences that geographically are not able to come and visit and connect our programs. But I agree with all colleagues here that keeping that physical experience and focusing on experiences of meaning and purpose, I think will be more important than ever. I think we all feel that we can't wait to go back and visit the gallery space or see the show again. I don't think we'll see them in the same light as we did before all of this occurred. I mean, I was at the opening of Michael Rakowitz's exhibition, and I think if I return and see his work again, I'll view it completely differently. And I actually can't wait for that. So, yeah.
No, completely. I agree.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just very quickly. I mean, in these kinds of crises, there's also a great kind of global reckoning. I mean, Art Jamil has partnered with the V&A and with the Met for many, many years, and we're having conversations with those institutions too. And, obviously among the world's most visited and grandest museums, but this is a time when colleagues are coming together all over the world with very similar kind of challenges to face. And I think that the kind of idea of coming together in something formal, I do think actually that, Lisa, that's a great idea. I mean, it would be, I think this period has seen an enormous amount of brainstorming, and particularly in the UAE, I think pretty much every government department that has anything to do with culture has organized a kind of ideathon or reached out to the community to ask for ideas and to exchange, practices and ideas. And that's something incredibly kind of positive. And, something similar is also kind of happening in Saudi. And so it's been a very interesting time of really kind of trying to throw everything up in the air and think again. And to be able to do that with government and with the sector is something really kind of special. I don't know whether it's happening elsewhere in Bahrain and Kuwait and other places too, but it's something that's been incredibly kind of exciting, and long may that continue. Hope we don't lose that from this moment when we move forward.
But the beauty is the strength of the informal network and the solidarity which was expressed very quickly, even before, when we felt it changing. Indeed, Antonia, I remember we was happening over the weekend, and this is also in a world of uncertainty, sharing and being able to brainstorm, exchange informally, and to know is also as important as the formal forums, which indeed could be developed more. But I think there is also an opportunity for new type of association or new, for instance, we will work with a digital music platform, Alghanim, and we will do a playlist, so purely musical, inspired by the main thematics of Louvre Abu Dhabi, universal beauty, exchanges, and they have their team has created playlists. We're going to launch soon, but and it's a new type of working together with everybody is completely on his core activity, museum or music, and we meet somewhere. And I think there are new meeting and connective opportunity coming ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. We're over our time. The sun is about to set and iftar is about to be served, but it's really been wonderful to share this Zoom with you and our audience. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. They're really fascinating. I think we will share them with all of you, and I think there's definitely room for much more discussion. And thank you, Raymond and Arab Gulf States, for hosting us. And hopefully the next time we can have colleagues from the rest of the Gulf with us, because we definitely miss their voices, and we would love to expand this conversation beyond. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Hanan. Thank you all. Thank you. Special thanks to our speakers, our moderator for making the time to join us and sharing their insights. I'm really happy that we were able to contribute to this really important conversation happening in the region and generate some potential collaboration. So we look forward to following up with Lisa next time on the regional grouping and see where she can take it. So we're putting the onus on Lisa to do so. And we, as Hanan mentioned, we'll continue this conversation. We'll hope to bring in some more artists next time, some folks from other Gulf countries to join the conversation. We have a lot of other webinars planned as well for the coming weeks, so make sure to visit our website, agsiw.org, and sign up to our weekly newsletter for regular analysis and updates and notices about events. Again, thank you all for joining, and we look forward to staying in touch with all of you.